As we traverse the corridors of history, leaving behind the towering spires and shadowed alleys of the Middle Ages, we emerge into the light and shadow of the early modern period. This era, stretching from the late 15th to the 18th century, is often romanticized as a time of great discovery, enlightenment, and progress. Yet, this bright dawn was also a time of darker intrigues, where the last echoes of medieval fears still whispered through the halls of power and superstition. In our last journey together, we explored the intricate weave of the High and Late Middle Ages, a time of profound societal, religious, and intellectual transformation. We witnessed the changing roles and perceptions of women, from revered healers and artisans to feared and persecuted witches. This shift wasn't sudden, but a gradual confluence of economic, theological, and societal currents. The climax, however, was a tome of darkness, the Malleus Maleficarum, that codified fear and misogyny, setting the stage for centuries of witch hunts. Now we stand at the precipice of a new era. The early modern period heralds significant revolutions: the Protestant Reformation that shook the very foundations of religious power, the Age of Enlightenment that challenged old superstitions with new thoughts, and the advent of a more complex global economy that redefined societal structures. Yet, amidst this renaissance of thought and culture, the witch hunts reached their zenith. Why did an age that celebrated the triumph of human reason also witness some of the most brutal witch persecutions in history? And crucially, what does this paradox tell us about the evolving roles and rights of women? In this episode, we will navigate these tumultuous waters, exploring how the great movements of the early modern era impacted the lives of those caught in the crosshairs of fear and superstition. We will delve into the heart of the witch hunt's paradox, an era that sought to redefine humanity's understanding of the natural world and its own societal constructs, yet clung to one of the most primal fears of the unknown. So join us as we unravel these complex threads, understanding that history isn't a linear march of progress, but a fascinating tapestry of light and shadow, reason and superstition, fear and courage. If you are enjoying this, please like and subscribe. It helps me out. Thank you. As the early modern era dawned, it heralded significant changes and progress. Yet, amidst this transformative period, a sinister storm was brewing. The witch hunts reached their feverish climax. This era, marking the advent of modernity, also witnessed some of the most notorious and deadly witch trials in history. From the rolling hills of Pendle to the Puritan strongholds of Salem, and from the ecclesiastical territories like Würzburg and Bamberg to countless hamlets all across Europe. But why did societies, standing on the precipice of the future, intensify their pursuit of an archaic evil? The key to this paradox lies in the unique confluence of societal, religious, and economic upheavals that characterize this era. A perfect storm that engendered an atmosphere ripe for fear and fanaticism. Central to this maelstrom was the profound religious transformation ignited by the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. The fractures these movements created within European societies weren't merely theological. They were deeply social and political. As Protestantism challenged the centuries-old dominance of Catholicism, societies found themselves grappling with existential crises of unprecedented scale. In this volatile climate, witchcraft was construed as a palpable embodiment of chaos and moral decay, threatening the very soul of the new social order. Accusations of witchcraft, then, became a potent weapon wielded by both religious factions, serving dual purposes: purging society of perceived spiritual impurities and consolidating waning control amidst tumultuous religious divides. The era was also marked by significant socio-economic unrest. Famine, poverty, and disease were the hallmarks of the time, partly due to climatic aberrations like the Little Ice Age. Such hardships often impel societies to seek scapegoats, and those accused of witchcraft, often women marginalized due to age, economic status, or physical ability, bore the brunt of this collective desperation. These accusations were not solely driven by fear. They were also tools for personal and economic gain. They provided a convenient means to eliminate rivals, settle scores, or confiscate property, revealing a darker facet of human nature, eager to exploit chaos for personal benefit. Torture, a tragic hallmark of the trials, was indiscriminately used to extract confessions, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of accusation and execution. The very fabric of communities was torn asunder, with trust eroding under the weight of suspicion and fear. In this fray, women were disproportionately targeted. The witch hunts were not merely a quest to vanquish supposed evil, but were also an assertion of societal and gender norms, a backlash against the autonomy and resilience of women who defied conventional roles. The religious fervor stoked by figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin, who both strongly believed in the existence of witches and the necessity of their extermination, played a substantial role in perpetuating the hunts. Their theological influence, coupled with the Catholic Church's resolute stance against witchcraft, exemplified by documents like the Malleus Maleficarum and papal bulls like Summus Desiderantes, entrenched the concept of witchcraft as a diabolical reality in the societal consciousness. The transition into the 17th century marked the advent of an intellectual and cultural blossoming that would reshape the contours of European thought: the Enlightenment. This epoch, anchored in ideals of reason, scientific inquiry, and human rights, didn't simply repudiate the previous century's beliefs, but sought to understand and critique the foundations upon which they were built. How, then, did this new way of thinking impact the witch hunts that had for so long cast a shadow over Europe? Enlightenment thinkers championed rationalism and skepticism, not as dismissive of past beliefs, but as tools to dissect and understand them. They didn't see their predecessors as simply superstitious or fearful, but as individuals trying to make sense of the world with the tools they had available. The Enlightenment's quest was to refine these tools, to rely on empirical evidence and logical reasoning, which contrasted with the rationale used to justify witch hunts. Voltaire, the incisive French philosopher, stood as a bulwark against the unfounded accusations and trials of alleged witches. He didn't just mock the belief in witches as irrational. He critiqued the social, religious, and institutional structures that upheld these beliefs. His famous admonition reflects this approach. Once your faith, sir, persuades you to believe what your intelligence declares to be absurd, beware lest you likewise sacrifice your reason in the conduct of your life. Voltaire's critique focused less on the individuals who held these beliefs and more on the systems that perpetuated them. In a similar vein, Sir Isaac Newton, the English polymath, laid a groundwork for what would become the scientific method. Newton's emphasis on observation and experimentation provided alternative explanations for natural phenomena that had previously been attributed to witchcraft or supernatural forces. His work didn't so much disprove the existence of the supernatural as introduce a new paradigm for understanding the natural world, one that would increasingly leave little room for witchcraft within its explanatory framework. It's crucial to note that the Enlightenment didn't bring an immediate end to witch hunts. Trials, including the notorious Salem witch trials in the American colonies, continued into this period. However, the era's emphasis on empirical evidence and rationality began to permeate legal systems, leading to more stringent requirements for evidence and fairer trial procedures. Accusations of witchcraft could no longer rely on hearsay or spectral evidence. They needed to adhere to the emerging standards of empirical proof. The Enlightenment also heralded a burgeoning emphasis on human rights. The notion that all individuals possessed inherent rights and dignity, including the right to a fair trial and freedom from torture, undercut the justifications for the brutal methods often used in witch trials. This growing respect for individual rights, combined with the demand for empirical evidence, fundamentally altered the judicial landscape, making the sort of proceedings commonplace in witch trials increasingly untenable. In this exploration, we see not a sudden shift, but a gradual evolution of thought, from a framework that made sense of the world through a certain theological and philosophical lens, to one that sought understanding through empirical observation and humanistic principles. The Enlightenment, therefore, didn't merely end the witch hunts. It provided an alternative way of interpreting the world, one that, over time, eroded the intellectual and legal foundations upon which the hunts were justified. While the Enlightenment planted the seeds of skepticism and advocated for human rights, its full impact on the legal and societal norms surrounding witchcraft would not be felt until later in the century, as we will explore in detail. The period between the 16th and 18th centuries wasn't just a time of religious upheaval and intellectual revolution. It was also an era of profound economic and social transformation. The foundations of feudalism were giving way to the early stages of capitalism. Mercantilism dictated the policies of burgeoning empires, and colonial expansion opened new frontiers of wealth and exploitation. These shifts, while setting the stage for modern economic systems, also exacerbated social inequalities and tensions, which played a significant role in the scapegoating and persecution associated with witchcraft accusations. Mercantilism, with its emphasis on stockpiling wealth and strict regulation of economy and trade, often intensified national and regional economic rivalries. The economic stresses resulting from these policies frequently trickled down to the lower strata of society, disproportionately impacting vulnerable populations, particularly women. Women, already marginalized in many societal aspects, often bore the brunt of these economic hardships, making them convenient scapegoats during times of crisis. The transition towards capitalism further destabilized traditional communal living. The enclosure movement, for example, privatized common lands previously accessible to all members of a village or town. This not only disrupted community practices, but also deprived many women of their traditional roles within these communal spaces, roles that had provided them with some measure of economic independence and societal respect. As these women faced increasing economic vulnerability, accusations of witchcraft became an expedient means to expel them from communities or seize their meager resources. Case studies from this period often reveal a clear economic motivation behind witchcraft accusations. One such example is in the Würzburg and Bamberg witch trials in the Holy Roman Empire, which led to the execution of thousands. Many of those accused were wealthy individuals or those who held positions of economic influence, and their trials and subsequent executions allowed for the seizure of their assets and redistribution of their wealth. Similarly, in the Salem witch trials, several of those accused came from families with substantial land holdings, and their prosecutions led to the reallocation of these valuable resources. Another potent example is the Pendle witch trials in England. The area around Pendle Hill had been known for generations as a place of healing, known for its cunning folk, who were healers and wise women. However, amid the economic pressures of the time, including the enclosure movement, these individuals, mostly women, became targets. Their traditional practices were redefined as malevolent witchcraft, and their persecution served both as a reaffirmation of societal control and as a removal of economic competition. These instances highlight the intricate interplay between socio-economic changes and witchcraft accusations. They underscore the idea that, while belief in witchcraft was certainly a factor in these hunts, it was often interwoven with more pragmatic concerns. The targeting of women, especially those on the margins of society, reflects the broader socio-economic tensions of the age. These women, caught at the crossroads of shifting economic systems and societal norms, became convenient scapegoats, their persecution serving to both alleviate societal anxieties and reinforce emerging economic and social structures. The early modern period was marked not only by religious, intellectual, and economic revolutions, but also significant transformations in the legal domain. As the principles of the Enlightenment began permeating societal institutions, the justice system too underwent critical scrutiny. This was a period that saw the gradual evolution of legal standards, moving away from proof through torture and spectral evidence towards a more evidence-based approach. These changes didn't happen overnight, nor were they uniform across different regions, but they played a crucial role in the decline of witch hunt convictions. One of the landmark shifts was the increasing skepticism towards spectral evidence. Such evidence, which included testimony about dreams and visions, had been a staple in witch trials, often forming the crux of the prosecution's case. However, as judicial standards evolved, influenced by Enlightenment ideals of rationalism and empirical evidence, such testimonies were increasingly viewed as unreliable. Legal scholars and judges began advocating for more concrete evidence, a shift epitomized by figures such as Matthew Hale in England and Johann Salus in Switzerland. Their writings and legal rulings highlighted the need for careful scrutiny and tangible evidence, setting new precedents that would influence witchcraft trials. Further legal reforms emerged from the growing discourse on human rights and the individual's relationship with the state. Torture, which had been extensively used to extract confessions in witch trials, came under increasing criticism. Philosophers like Cesare Beccaria in Italy strongly argued against the use of torture, not just on moral grounds, but also questioning the reliability of evidence obtained under such duress. These debates gradually led to the outlawing or limiting of torture in various jurisdictions, a significant step towards more humane and just legal procedures. In addition to these broader shifts, specific legal cases and statutes significantly impacted the conduct of witch trials. In England, the Witchcraft Act of 1736 marked a pivotal turn. Rather than demonizing witchcraft, this law targeted individuals who claimed to have the ability to use magic, thereby defrauding people, reflecting a shift from persecution to skepticism about the existence of witchcraft itself. The impact of these legal evolutions was profound. Trials that did occur now faced higher standards of evidence, and convictions became rarer. Gradually, as these legal standards and societal attitudes shifted, the frenzy of the witch hunts began to wane. The story of these legal changes is not just a tale of the triumph of rationality over superstition. It's a complex narrative of societal evolution. It's about the transformation of institutions and legal standards in response to broader shifts in philosophical thought, morality, and understandings of human rights. This legal evolution played a crucial role in curtailing the excesses of the witch hunts and set the stage for the development of more equitable legal systems in the centuries to follow. Beyond the courtroom and the gallows, the fascination and fear of witchcraft were vividly reflected in the cultural tapestry of the early modern period. Literature and art became powerful mediums through which societal attitudes towards witchcraft were both revealed and shaped. These expressions were not mere reflections of contemporary views, but were active participants in the dialogue of their time, sometimes challenging, sometimes reinforcing prevailing narratives about witchcraft. If you are listening to this episode inside of a theater, please cover your ears for the next 30 seconds. In literature, one cannot overlook the influence of William Shakespeare, particularly his iconic play, Macbeth. Written in the early 17th century during the reign of King James I, an era rife with witch hunts and the king's own obsession with demonology, Macbeth features three of the most famous witches in literary history. The witches in the play are portrayed as malevolent beings, their prophecy setting off a chain of events leading to Macbeth's tragic downfall. However, their depiction goes beyond simple caricatures of evil. Shakespeare's witches are complex, their riddles showing a deep understanding of human nature and ambition. This nuanced portrayal reflects the playwright's own ambivalence towards the witch hunts of his time, perhaps criticizing the hysteria by showing how fear and ambition can lead to one's ruin. In the realm of art, the works of Hans Baldung Green and Albrecht Dürer stand out. Baldung, in his paintings and woodcuts, often depicted witches in the midst of sabbats or engaging in sorcery, with a focus on the sensual and the macabre. These images, while sensational, also revealed an undercurrent of fear and fascination with female sexuality and power, themes that were central to the witch hunts of the period. Dürer, on the other hand, brought a more humanistic approach. His famous engraving, Four Witches, presents its subjects as more natural and less demonized, perhaps reflecting a more skeptical view of witchcraft hysteria. These cultural artifacts were not created in a vacuum. They interacted with and influenced public perception. Shakespeare's plays were performed to the masses, while the artworks of Baldung and Dürer were widely circulated, their images shaping contemporary views on witchcraft. They provided a space for society to confront its fears, desires, and moral conflicts surrounding the witch hunts, encapsulating the tensions of an era. This interplay between art, literature, and societal views forms a crucial part of understanding the epoch's psyche. These works of art and literature, while reinforcing certain stereotypes, also opened up spaces for introspection and critique, reflecting the multifaceted nature of society's relationship with witchcraft. In the dance of fear and fascination, condemnation and counterculture, they offer us profound insights into a world grappling with change, authority, and the unknown. As the 18th century wore on, the frenzied peak of the witch hunts began to ebb. This decline wasn't attributable to a single factor, but was rather the result of a confluence of societal, legal, and intellectual evolutions that gradually eroded the foundations upon which the witch hunts stood. Legally, significant reforms began to take root. Courts, once dominated by accusatory hysteria, started demanding more substantial evidence, often discrediting spectral and testimonial evidence that had long been the mainstay of witch trials. Landmark cases, where accused witches were acquitted or trials were dismissed, became turning points, setting precedents that diffused throughout judicial systems. The notion of innocent until proven guilty began to overshadow the previous panic-induced guilty until proven innocent mindset. The Enlightenment, now in its zenith, further propelled these legal and societal shifts. Building on the intellectual transformations explored in our previous sections, Enlightenment principles of reason, empiricism, and human rights had deeply permeated societal structures, reshaping public opinion and judicial processes. While figures like Voltaire and Isaac Newton initiated this shift, it was the widespread dissemination of their ideas, thanks to advancements like the printing press, that fomented a broader societal demand for rational proof and skepticism in the face of unverified claims. Moreover, the advocacy for human rights, especially women's rights, began to gain momentum. Early feminists and their allies highlighted the injustices and atrocities of the witch hunts, using these examples as a springboard to advocate for greater protections and rights for women. This advocacy contributed to a broader societal shift, one that began to view women more as individuals with rights rather than as potential threats. Economically and politically, Europe was undergoing substantial changes. The rise of more centralized governmental structures provided better legal protections and lessened local communal pressures, which had often fueled witch hunt frenzies. Additionally, as Europe stabilized after the turmoil of the Reformation and the 30 Years' War, there was less societal upheaval to drive the desperate search for scapegoats. By the end of the 18th century, the last of the witch trials were drawing to a close, but their legacy was far from over. The end of the witch hunts didn't immediately rectify the societal position of women. The suspicions and attitudes that had fueled these hunts lingered, continuing to influence women's roles and rights. The hunts had stripped away agency, power, and even the lives of countless women, leaving a lasting impact on societal views and women's self-perception. As we conclude this exploration of witchcraft in the early modern era, we are confronted with a historical tapestry rich with complexity and contradiction. This era witnessed the terrifying zenith of the witch hunts, where fear and superstition reigned, only to see these shadows recede as the light of reason, legal reform, and human rights advocacy shone increasingly brighter. The witch hunts weren't isolated phenomena, but were deeply entwined with the societal, religious, and economic upheavals of the time. They were a manifestation of the fears, anxieties, and power struggles that plagued a world in transition. Women, especially those on the margins of society, bore the brunt of these forces, caught in the crossfire of change and conflict. Yet this period also saw the seeds of positive transformation. The very forces that contributed to the witch hunt's escalation also catalyzed their decline. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on rational thought and empirical evidence, played a pivotal role in challenging the superstitions that underpin the witch hunts. Philosophers and scientists provided critical voices of reason, demanding evidence and advocating for human rights. Their contributions were instrumental in shifting societal perspectives, influencing legal reforms that demanded more stringent standards of evidence and fairer trials. However, the end of the witch hunts didn't spell the end of challenges for women. The stereotypes, prejudices, and fears that fueled these hunts left indelible marks on societal perceptions of women, shaping their roles, rights, and self-images for centuries to come. As we look forward to an intriguing shift in our next episode, the 19th century and beyond would witness a fascinating transformation and revival of the concepts of witchcraft and paganism. No longer as the feared and reviled practices of the past, but as part of a rich cultural and spiritual tapestry that continues to evolve to this day. So join us in our next episode as we explore these new developments, unraveling how they reflect broader societal shifts and continuing our exploration of the ever-evolving tapestry of human belief, power, and identity.